Hey music people, today I want to talk to you about making music in a home studio, and I want to share with you 5 mistakes that you must avoid. Let's get started. My name is Jeff and welcome to Ignite Music Project. If this is your first time to the channel, subscribe and hit the bell icon so that you get notified every time I drop a new video. Guys, I want to tell you a little bit more about myself and share a little bit more of my story. I'm a musician. I'm a singer. I'm a songwriter. I play guitar. I play bass. I play drums. And I've been playing music all my life. About 10 years ago, I decided that I wanted to record my own song ideas, and so I jumped in headfirst. I went online and searched everything I could find about making music. I took some college courses, I read manuals, I read user guides, and I just dove headfirst. I started recording, I started mixing, I started putting out my music, and I spent thousands of hours searching for mixing tips and tricks and finding out the easiest and quickest way to make music. And I'm here to tell you something, guys. I wasted a lot of time. I wasted a lot of time searching for things that really didn't help me make music. And I want to help you, my fellow musicians, my fellow music makers and home studio owners. I want to help you avoid the same mistakes that I made. So with that said, I've put together a list of 5 mistakes that I want you to avoid when making music. And let's get started with number 1. Recording too loud. Raise your hand if you've ever heard this phrase. When recording your tracks, you want to record as loud as you can without clipping. I'm here to tell you guys that when you're recording in the digital domain, that is not the way you want to record. That thought process comes from recording in the analog world. You see, when recording through hardware and recording onto tape or printing to vinyl, there was inherent noise that process produced. There was hum, there was hiss, and so in order to make sure that those sounds weren't heard in your final mixes, you wanted to make sure that your tracks were recorded loud enough so that they would be above the noise floor, as they called it. Well, today, we don't have that same problem. When we are recording through our audio interfaces onto our computer, we can record a really clean signal that doesn't have that hum and hiss that tape would produce. In fact, our DAWs and the plugins that we use actually have an optimal level that they were designed to work at. This is called gain staging, right? And I'm going to talk more about setting proper gain staging throughout the mixing process in a future video. But for our purposes today, a basic rule of thumb is that when you are recording your tracks, I would suggest that instead of recording them as loud as you possibly can, I would suggest that you record about 50% to 75% of the way up the meter, so that when you're recording, that's where the meter will be bouncing on your fader. This will allow you to solve a lot of problems that come when you record too loud. Your plugins won't work as well. You're going to be slamming all that into your mix and master bus. You're not going to give yourself enough headroom for the mix or for the mastering process, and it's going to cause a lot of problems. So mistake number 1 to avoid is recording too loud. Make sure you record at a more conservative level, about 50% to 75% of the way up the meter. Number 2, over-processing and not level matching. Guys, when I first started making music, I was so excited at all the possibilities that there were. I started working in Cubase, and they had plugins, and they had EQs and compressors and all sorts of stuff that I was excited to use. And my mindset was, I'm going to take this poorly recorded track that I've made, and I'm going to make it better by throwing all this processing onto it. I couldn't have been more wrong about the way to make great sounding music, guys. There are 3 plugins that I found that I overused at the beginning, because here's the deal. We want what we're doing to make a difference, right? And so I found that every time I would put on a plugin onto my track, I wanted there to be a huge difference, right? I wanted my decisions that I was making to really make my song sound great. But in the end, what I was doing was I was harming or hurting my mix. I was making it sound worse. And there are 3 plugins that I would always overuse at the beginning and that most people do. Number 1 is a compressor. I would slam my track so that there was tons of compression happening. And in my novice state of mixing, I thought that sounded good. Another culprit was EQ. I would boost way too much, and I would cut way too much of my tracks so that they sounded unnatural. They didn't sound natural, they sounded artificial. And in the end, I've realized that the way I like my music to sound, I like them to sound natural. I like things to sound like the way we are used to hearing them through our own ears. And the other plugin that I would always overuse is reverb. I used way too much reverb. It's really cool at first when you can put your guitar recording into a huge cathedral, but the reality is most of the times the reverb that you think sounds good is actually being overused. A general rule of thumb is to just bring up the reverb until you can audibly hear it. You can hear the reverb and then back it off a little bit. There are a lot more things that go into setting a great sounding reverb, and I'm going to talk about that more in a later video, but general rule of thumb is to just go easy on the processing. The process of mixing is lots of little steps combined together to make a great result, right? It's the cumulative effect of all this that we are doing that will make a song sound great and its best. Not any one plugin is gonna make the difference. And so be more conservative until you really start to understand what these plugins are doing and how they are affecting the sound, and you'll be way better off, I promise. Then the second part of that is to not level matching. Here's the thing, guys. We as human beings prefer things to be louder. When a track is louder or when music is louder, there's a few things that we perceive. We perceive more bass, we hear more high end, we hear more energy in the mix, and so we are always going to prefer the louder, even though it may not be any better at all. And when we are using processing, quite often the track will be made louder, especially when using things like compression or EQ. After we've compressed and we have the auto gain set, and it's going to sound louder. And so we are going to prefer that. We're going to say, oh, this sounds way better because it's louder, even though what we are doing to the track may actually be hurting it in the long run. So this is what you want to do. With every track or with every plugin that you use, you want to make sure that the volume going in and the volume going out is the same. It doesn't have to be exact, but at least you want to get it into the right ballpark. You can use your eyes if there's a meter, but you also want to use your ears. And if you do that, if you make sure that the level is the same, you're not going to be tricked or fooled into thinking that what you're doing is making tracks sound better. So that's number 2, the mistake to avoid. Over-processing and not level matching. Mistake number 3, not using automation. Automation is built into most modern DAWs, and it is a tool that you can use to automatically, as the track plays, make adjustments. And one of the biggest things that I learned to help my tracks sound better is using volume automation and panning automation. And the track or the instrument that I found benefits the most by using automation is the lead vocal track, or vocals. Vocals in and of themselves are very dynamic. And so as they go throughout a song, there are going to be parts of that vocal performance that are quieter and that are louder. And we can use certain tools like compression to help even out those peaks and those low parts of that track. But that only gets us part of the way there. In order to really make that track heard and to make it stand out where it needs to, we need to adjust the volume as the track goes. You can use volume automation to make sure that certain parts of that vocal are brought up in volume. Like the ending of a phrase, we usually sing it and it trails off. Well, bring that up. At certain loud parts, we can bring down with the volume fader. Maybe at the chorus or the bridge, we want to bump the whole volume of that vocal track up a little bit to make sure that there's more impact there. There are certain techniques and things we can use to help a listener pay attention to what we want them to pay attention to. So play around with automation. It's fairly easy to use. Every DAW is a little bit different, and I'll have more training on how to use automation later, but that's just a quick thing to be thinking about. How can you use automation to help your song sound better? Mistake number 4, believing in magic bullets. What do I mean by magic bullet? Oh, if only I had that $3,000 Avalon mic preamp, then my vocal tracks will sound better. Ah, if only I had that new Waves plugin bundle, then I can really make my songs sound the way I want them to. The biggest mistake you can make while you're recording your own music is thinking that a plugin or a microphone or a preamp or a tube preamp or a hardware compressor will make your songs go from bad to great. That's not how it works, guys. Have you ever heard the phrase garbage in, garbage out? Well, it's true. Don't believe that anything that you're going to do in the mixing process will fix a bad recording. If it sounds bad when you recorded it, it's going to sound bad when you mix it. It's just not possible to turn garbage into amazing sounding music. So be thinking about that. Don't fall victim to the hype machine and the marketing machine that's out there that tells you that the difference between your song being bad and good is a plugin. Don't get me wrong. There are some great sounding plugins that do amazing things. There are great sounding preamps that sound great. And do they help? Absolutely. But they are not the one thing that's going to make your songs sound great. Again, it's just like mixing. It's the cumulative process. All the little things that we are doing combined together. Each of them play a part. Mistake number 5, not using reference tracks. What is a reference track? Well, it's pretty simple. How do we know what a great sounding song sounds like? How do we know what a great mix or a great master sounds like? Why not listen to what the pros have done, right? It's pretty simple. Find a song that you know that has been professionally mixed and mastered that you think sounds great. Maybe it's a song on the radio. Maybe it's a song of your favorite band that you think sounds great, and use that as a guide or a reference to know what your song or mix should sound like. Are we copying it? No, but we're using it as a reference. Get a track that has similar tempo, similar vibe, similar instrumentation as the track you're working on, and pull it into your session, pull it into your project, have it be on its own track and its own fader, and be able to solo between that and the rest of your mix so that you can use it as a reference as you go. It will help you determine how much low end, how much top end you need in your mix, how loud the lead vocal needs to be and where it needs to sit in the mix, how loud the electric guitars need to be, how much bottom end the acoustic guitars need. It will help you make decisions and give you a reference or a guide. Well, there you go, guys. 5 mistakes that you must avoid when you start mixing music. And I think this is going to help you guys if you take these and think about them, chew on them for a little bit, maybe think of other areas of your mixing process or the way that you make music that could fit into these categories, and start implementing those basic principles. And I know that it will help you. It will put you on the right path. It'll help you to get better quicker at mixing music and making music in your home studio. If you like this video, guys, and you found it helpful, give it a thumbs up and like the video and share it with a music friend that might be interested in making music from their home studio as well. And until next time, guys, again, I'm Jeff. See ya.